Hi, welcome to our channel of IGNOU Audiobooks, Indira Gandhi National Open University, School of Sciences, SOS, others programs. Appreciation Course on Environment, ACE. Block 2 Environment Management. Unit 7 Resource Management, 7.1 Introduction. In the previous units, you have studied that the mode of development adopted in the modern world is based on highly intensive use of various resources that many a times borders on exploitation. It has brought in its wake severe environmental degradation and crises. In spite of heightened environmental consciousness and movements worldwide, there seems to be little possibility that modern societies will switch over to a frugal, need-based lifestyle in the foreseeable future. In effect, we can envision a scenario wherein all natural resources will be required in abundance. Therefore, modern societies need to think of ways of replenishing these resources. That is why, one of the major environmental concerns today is how to manage natural resources in a sustainable way without degrading the environment and at the same time fulfilling the requirements of an ever-growing population in an optimal manner. In this unit, we discuss some issues related to management of resources like water, soil, energy, mineral and biological resources such as forests and wildlife. You will learn about the importance of reducing waste materials, reusing and recycling them. We have also described a few people's initiatives illustrating how resource regeneration and management can be carried out through voluntary action. Objectives. After studying this unit, you should be able to discuss the major issues and problems related to natural resource use. Describe the strategies for natural resource conservation. Undertake appropriate individual initiatives for resource conservation and regeneration. Realize the importance of reducing, reusing and recycling of waste and take suitable steps at individual, community level for waste management and appreciate the role of voluntary action and people's participation in the management of natural resources. 7.2 Management of Resources, Issues and Concerns. The major issues in management of natural resources faced by modern societies may be perceived as regeneration of resources and their optimal, equitable and efficient utilization in an environment-friendly manner. Modern industrial society is facing a severe crunch of all resources due to indiscriminates. Unless urgent steps are taken to mitigate these shortages in an environment-friendly manner, we are likely to be hit by major crises. Indeed, oil and water are already at the center stage of global and regional conflicts. Let us learn about the problems related to management of natural resources and the various approaches being adopted to handle them. 7.2.1 Water. In terms of human needs, water is most important, next only to air. Although almost 3/4 of Earth's surface is covered with water, only 3% of all water is fresh water, which sustains life on this planet. As we all know, water is increasingly becoming a scarce commodity. Its scarcity threatens us all, menacing our well-being, jeopardizing our EVLE, and sometimes endangering our lives. For many millions of people, water scarcity is defined as much by poor quality as by insufficient quantity. As reported in 2001 by the United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA, within the next 25 years, fully 1/3 of the world's population will experience severe water scarcity. Right now, more than 1 billion people lack access to safe drinking water and 3 billion people, half of the Earth's population, lack access to basic sewage systems. More than 90% of all the sewage produced in the developing countries returns untreated to land and water. Population growth, industrialization, and urbanization are depleting and polluting lakes, rivers, and aquifers irreversibly. New technologies empower us to extract water supplies faster than the rate of replenishment. Unless water resources are managed properly, we will keep facing paradoxical situations like lack of drinking water due to pollution even in above average rainfall. areas or contamination of abundant water bodies. As populations increase and economic development intensifies, critical policy decisions would need to be taken on a long-term basis for regenerating, regulating, allocating, and using water resources. In future, conflicting demands will increasingly be felt between the needs for safe drinking water and sanitation as well as industrial and agricultural activities. How can we balance the many conflicting interests involved in water resource allocation and management? How can we replenish water resources? How do we prevent waste and encourage behavior that supports sustainable use of water resources? How can we provide an equitable distribution system? These are some of the questions that make water one of the hottest issues. Today, agriculture is by far the biggest consumer of water. Almost 70% of available water is consumed every year in agricultural production worldwide. In Asia, it accounts for 86% of total annual water withdrawal, compared with 49% in North and Central America and 38% in Europe. The Green Revolution in India ushered in an era of energy and resource-intensive agriculture. Water was a critical input to the Green Revolution, through irrigation, flood control, and drainage, and it has contributed most to the growth in wheat and rice production for the past 30 years. But this increase has been bought at a heavy cost to the environment. A proportion of the chemicals applied as fertilizer and for pest and weed control pollutes rivers and lakes through runoff or groundwater through leaching. In large areas of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh, the over-exploitation of water through tube wells and shallow wells is giving rise to many problems. It is not only causing shortages of drinking water, but also leading to pollution when aquifers are recharged with irrigation water contaminated with chemicals. Implications for future agricultural production are to develop water-efficient measures giving more productivity per unit of water input. This would require efficient operation of irrigation systems, technologies that reduce water consumption, appropriate soil and water conservation measures, changes in cropping patterns and the ways in which crops are grown, so as to use water more efficiently. Economic incentives would need to be given to farmers to reduce water losses and prevent water pollution through better soil, water and crop management practices. Similar standards would need to be set and enforced for industries to cut down on water use and prevent them for dumping polluting effluent discharges into water bodies. This calls for a comprehensive policy framework at the national level to ensure an integrated approach to water resource development, with rational and equitable allocation of water resources to agriculture, industry and domestic use. Priority must be given to the resource poor and unserved. At the local level, several water management strategies are in use today that offer practical and sometimes superior alternatives to the large-scale, centralized, capital-intensive approaches to water management. They can also complement wider-reaching water management approaches. One of these is rainwater harvesting practiced in India since antiquity. In this respect, we have a lot to learn from our ancestors who had perfected the art of water management. Several methods are being used in the traditional system of water harvesting in different regions of the country. For example, Johads, AABS as surface water bodies and kunds, underground tanks, are in vogue in many parts of the country. In the northeastern hills, bamboo drip irrigation is practiced to conserve water. In a cold desert area like Spiti in Himachal Pradesh, kul irrigation is practiced. Since ancient times, kuls are diversion channels made to carry water from glaciers to villages and have existed for centuries. The kuls often span long distances, some being 10 kilometers long, and run down precipitous mountain slopes and across crags and crevices. In several parts of the world, notably India, the subcontinent, Africa and Latin America, Groundwater flow varies considerably during the course of the year. Rainfalls result in very high flows and the flows are negligible during the dry seasons. In such areas, a very useful rainwater harvesting practice involves making groundwater dams. These are structures that intercept or obstruct the natural flow of groundwater and provide storage for water underground. Since water is stored underground, evaporation losses are much less. The risk of contamination of the stored water is reduced because parasites cannot breed in underground water. The problem of submergence of land, which is normally associated with surface dams, is not present with subsurface dams. Several methods are being followed by individuals and communities in urban as well as rural areas to harvest rainwater. One such scheme is operational in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. In Rashtrapati Bhavan, an underground tank of 1 lakh litre capacity has been constructed to store water for low-quality use. Rainwater from the northern side of roof and paved areas surrounding Rashtrapati Bhavan is diverted to it. 2 dug wells are used to store overflow from the 1 lakh litre rainwater storage tank. Another dry open well is recharged with rainwater from the southern side of the roof and runoff from the staff residential area. A desilting tank is used to remove pollutants from the water passing into the recharge well. It is also being planned to use rainwater available from rooftops, roads and parks in the Rashtrapati Bhavan for recharging the wells. For small domestic systems, ferrocement tanks can provide a low-cost and easy-to-build solution to store rainwater. Ferrocement is structurally more efficient than masonry as it consists of a thin heat of cement mortar reinforced with a cage made of wire mesh and steel bars. It requires only a few easily available materials: cement, sand, galvanized iron, ghee, wire mesh, and mild steel, MS, bars, in small amounts. Compared to masonry and RC, to construct ferrocement tanks. Moreover, ferrocement components can be cast in any shape using suitable molds. The thickness of the walls of a ferrocement container are as low as 1 to 15 mm. The technology is extremely simple to implement, and even semi-skilled persons can learn it with ease. It is indeed heartening to note that the number of individuals, residents, associations in urban areas engaged in water harvesting is increasing day by day. If you face water storage in your locality, you can initiate corrective practices at individual as well as community level. The Central Groundwater Board, Ministry of Water Resources, Government of India provides technical information on how to set up rainwater harvesting systems. Fig. 7.4 Some schemes for rainwater harvesting from rooftops. Look at the screen. 7.2.2 Land and soil. Environmental degradation has not only led to lowering of water tables but also to land degradation, soil erosion, and desertification, leading to erosion of livelihood of the resource poor who live off the land. Table 7.1 gives the worldwide statistics for land use. Notice that only about 10% of the world's land area is arable, able to be tilled for crops or under permanent crops such as orchards, plantations, or vineyards. The remaining area is too steep, too cold, too hot, too wet, or too dry for cultivation. Table 7.1 World Land Use, 1972 and 1987. Look at the screen. In India, between 30 and 50% of private and common land is estimated to be ecologically degraded to varying degrees and is generally referred to as wasteland, that is, land not producing its potential of biomass due to ecological degradation, over-exploitation, or the absence of a clear management system. Wasteland development involves regenerating the land through a variety of soil and water management practices, planting appropriate plant species, protecting them and sharing the benefits. However, merely developing and making wastelands available to the underprivileged rural populace will not solve their problems. This can happen only when the question of development and management of wastelands is linked closely to the issue of livelihood and the needs of the resource poor. Otherwise, as has often happened in many cases, the plant produces on wasteland will be garnered only by a few, or they plantations will be lost due to inadequate community participation or disinterest. The following programs are being implemented currently as part of the national effort towards wasteland development. Integrated Wastelands Development Project, LWDP, schemes. Technology Development Extension and Training Scheme. Support to NGOs and voluntary agencies, grant in AIDJ scheme. Investment Promotional Schemes, IPS. Wastelands Development Task Force, WDTF. The Society of Promotion of Wasteland Development, SPWD, has undertaken Charagah development in Rajasthan as one of its major activities. Charagahs are common lands allotted for cattle grazing in our village. In dry land areas like Rajasthan, the role of common lands is crucial in the maintenance of cattle population. Small farmers depend on charagahs as fodder availability over their own lands is poor, especially in the months when no fodder is available at all. Thus, the development of charagahs assumes importance. The following experiences reflect a measure of success in development of wasteland through voluntary efforts supported by government agencies. The case of Prayatna Samiti. Prayatna Samiti is an NGO involved in regenerating forestland and panchayat lands in villages of Gudli Bambra region of Girwa block in Udaipur district, Rajasthan. Its work on charagah protection was started by constructing cattle-proof trenches, stone walls around the common land. Appropriate soil and water conservation measures and plantation were undertaken along with dibbling of seeds, grass and trees. The market value of grass produced in these charagahs in 4 years was to the tune of Rs 0.32.5 lakhs. Apart from making fodder available, these efforts led to regeneration of local species and greatly reduced levels of soil erosion. The case of Hanuman Van Vikas Samiti. The Society for Promotion of Wastelands Development works with Hanuman Van Vikas Samiti in Tank village of Udaipur district since 1994. Due to soapstone mining in the charagah land by local residents, it was badly degraded. In addition, a major portion of the land was encroached by some influential people. Meetings were held with the village community to create awareness, remove encroachment and to stop mining. Self-help groups formed by Hanuman Van Vikas Samiti played a vital role in facilitating community action. A charagah management committee was formed to manage this work. Financial support was provided for the boundary wall, trench, pit, digging, gully plugs, check dam, plantation, dibbling of grass and tree seeds. The employment generated through these activities was to the tune of around 4,500 human days. In comparison, a similar period of soapstone mining would provide 2006 human days per year. Grass production from the charagah increased from 6 to 44 tons. The per family grass availability was 155 kilograms while the per animal availability was 27 kilogram during 2000-2001. An investment of 3 rupees 77 lakh was made for the development of 50 hectares of land. Hence, the average cost per hectare with local contribution was 7,540 rupees. At the prevailing rate of grass within the villages, its total value is estimated to be Rs. L.93 lakhs. Soil is literally the material we live on, it is the material that supports what we build, treats our waste, and purifies our water. Use of soil for any purpose changes it. Some of these changes may be good, many are not. Some of the severest challenges confronting agriculturists today are soil erosion, soil salinity, soil pollution and maintenance of soil fertility. Soil management comprises all methods of conserving soil maximizing the benefits of soil by maintaining its fertility and structure. Highly fertile soils result in high crop yields and good plant cover, which minimizes the erosive effects of raindrops, runoff and wind. Soil and water conservation are key factors in maintaining soil fertility. Soil erosion is the process in which the top layers of soil are removed and carried away from one place to another. In this process, mineral particles, organic matter, and nutrients from the soil are removed, reducing its thickness and weight holding EPAT. Eroded soil may then become a pollutant in streams and reservoirs. The time required to form new soil is so long that from human viewpoint, soil lost through erosion is lost forever. A host of practices such as bunding, mulching, soil moisture conservation, etc., needs to be adopted at a large scale to prevent soil erosion. One way of achieving and maintaining a fertile soil is to apply organic material in the form of green manures, straw or as manure which has already undergone a high degree of fermentation. This improves the cohesiveness of the soil, increases its water retention capacity and promotes a stable aggregate structure. Mineral fertilizer on their own have no long-term effect on the state of humus in the soil and they need organic support to bring about an improvement in aggregate structure. Moreover, the continual use of mineral fertilizer without organic manures leads to structural deterioration of the soil and increase its erodibility. In arid and semi-arid regions, too much or too little irrigation can lead to an increase in soluble salts, rendering the soil saline or alkaline and thus unfavorable for plant growth. As water evaporates from the soil, salts such as chlorides, sulfates, and bicarbonates of Na, Ca, and Mg accumulate in it. The most effective treatment of alkaline soils is to apply gypsum. A good drainage system must also be provided to assist with washing out the sodium from saline soils. Only the most salt-tolerant species can be grown in areas with severe soil salinity. The improper use of pesticide or excess fertilization can pollute the soil and inhibit or exclude plant growth. Using soil to treat wastes from animals or humans can lead to on-site pollution by adding unwanted chemicals or desirable chemicals in excess. Industrialized society produces a wide variety of chemical and radioactive wastes, most of which are disposed of on land. Chemicals leach from the soil and pollute groundwater. Thus, proper soil management also involves proper maintenance of organic and inorganic composition of soil. 7.2.3 Energy. India consumes roughly 3% of the world's total energy. Despite continuous increase in energy use, per capita consumption in India is still low compared with other countries. Energy needs in India are met by harnessing three categories of energy sources as shown below. Fig. 7.5, Various sources of energy. Look at the screen. Non-conventional sources. Biomass is a renewable energy source derived from plant resources, animal waste and the waste of various human activities. It is also derived from the byproducts of the timber industry, agricultural crop, raw material from the forest, major parts of household wastes and wood. Biomass is an important source of energy and the most important fuel worldwide after coal, oil and natural gas. Biomass does not add carbon dioxide to the atmosphere as it absorbs the same amount of carbon in growing as it releases when consumed as fuel. Its advantage is that it can be used to generate electricity with the same equipment or power plants that are now burning fossil fuels. Biomass fuels used in India account for about 1/3 of the total fuel used in the country. Over 90% of the rural households and about 15% of the urban households use biomass fuels, e.g. wood, cow dung cakes, crop residues, sawdust etc. The inefficient burning of such fuels in traditional chulhas is causing a serious problem of indoor air pollution and consequent health hazards. Moreover, the unsustainable level of consumption of fuel wood leads to deforestation and desertification, which degrades the environment. Thus, proper management of biomass as a resource is very essential. In this, end text, technological solutions, institutional arrangements, financial support and training schemes for ensuring adequate and affordable clean energy systems and services using biomass as great significance. An initiative in this direction has come from the Ministry of Non-Conventional Energy Sources, MNES. It has been promoting indigenously developed technologies for efficient utilization of biomass fuels with a focus on extraction of more energy, reduction of household consumption of firewood, generation of employment and improvement in the living standards of rural people. The biogas plant is perhaps the most important and popular technology developed indigenously for processing cattle dung. It serves the purpose of meeting fuel as well as manure requirement from the same quantity of cattle dung available in rural households and institutions. Biomass-based power generation, biomass, biogas-based EO generation. Research and development and biomass resource assessment is also being undertaken at the national level as a program of NEES. This program is mainly aimed at establishing techno-commercial feasibility and viability of power generation from biomass materials. Biomass gasifier is another technology in use for energy generation. A biomass gasifier converts solid biomass, both woody and powdery, materials such as wood, agricultural and agro-industrial wastes etc., into producer's gas. Through thermochemical gasification process, it has been found to be more practical to compress biomass into briquettes, blocks of different shapes, and thereby improve its utility and convenience of use. In the dense briquetted form, biomass can either be used directly as fuel instead of coal in the traditional chulhas and furnaces or in the gasifier. Gasifier converts solid fuel into a more convenient to use gaseous form of fuel. While many of these interventions are valid for rural populations or energy entrepreneurs, individuals and communities in urban areas can contribute to biomass production and conservation through tree plantation programs, forest conservation and waste management practices. Innumerable small initiatives in urban areas have been taken towards this end. Tree cover in urban areas has gone up considerably due to such effects. In the developed world, biomass energy is becoming important for applications such as combined heat and power generation. In addition, biomass energy is gaining significance as a source of clean heat for domestic heating and community heating applications. In fact, in countries like Finland, USA and Sweden, the per capita biomass energy used is higher than it is in India, China or in Asia. Solar energy is the most readily available abundant source of energy. It is free, as it does not belong to anybody. It is also non-polluting. Solar energy is being used in many parts of India for cooking, lighting, cooling, heating water for both industrial and domestic purposes. It is also being used to meet the electricity requirements in areas not connected to national electricity grid. Solar energy-based backup systems when electric supply fails are also in use in urban areas. Solar radiation gets converted into electricity directly in solar photovoltaic (SPV) panels installed on buildings or in open spaces. This electricity can either be used as it is or can be stored in the battery to be used for domestic lighting, street lighting, village electrification, water pumping, desalination of salty water, powering of remote telecommunication repeater stations and railway signals. Solar passive buildings use solar energy in building designs and cut down on energy consumption for heating and cooling. This technology is fast gaining acceptance in urban architecture. Fuel cells are electrochemical devices that convert the chemical energy of a fuel directly and very efficiently into electricity and heat, thus doing away with combustion. A fuel cell consists of an electrolyte sandwiched between two electrodes. The most suitable fuel for such cells is hydrogen or a mixture of compounds containing hydrogen. Oxygen passes over one electrode and hydrogen over the other, and they react electrochemically to generate Electricity, water and heat. Fuel cells are being used in space flights and can be used in electric vehicles to dramatically reduce urban air pollution. Fuel cell powered vehicles have very high energy conversion efficiency, almost double that of currently used engines. The emissions are significantly lower, CO2 and water vapor being the only emissions. Fuel cell powered electric vehicles score over the battery operated ones in terms of increased efficiency and easier and faster refueling. Fuel cell systems are excellent candidates for small-scale decentralized power generation. Fuel cells can supply combined heat and power to commercial buildings, hospitals and airports in remote locations. Fuel cell systems are modular, i.e. additional capacity can be added whenever required with relative ease, and can be set up wherever power is required. Hydropower is the cheapest and cleanest and, hence, the best source of energy. However, obtaining electricity from mega dams has given rise to many controversies in recent times, and small hydropower plants are emerging as viable alternatives. These plants serve the energy needs of remote and rural areas where the grid supply is not available. Energy can also be obtained from waves and tides. In India, the first wave energy project with a capacity of 150 megawatts has been set up at Vizhinjam near Trivandrum. A major tidal wave power project costing 5,000 crore rupees is proposed to be set up in the Hanthal Creek in the Gulf of Kutch in Gujarat. Volcanoes, hot springs, and geysers, and methane under the water in the oceans and seas are sources of geothermal energy. Geothermal means heat from the earth. In some countries, such as in the USA, water is pumped from underground hot water deposits and used to heat people's houses. In India, the northwestern Himalayas and the western coast are considered geothermal areas. Satellites like the IRSL have played an important role through infrared photographs of the ground in locating geothermal areas. The Geological Survey of India has already identified more than 350 hot spring sites, which can be explored as areas to tap geothermal energy. An experimental 1 kilowatt generation project in the Puga Valley in the Ladakh region is being used for poultry farming, mushroom cultivation and pashmina wool processing, all of which need higher temperature. Cogeneration is the concept of producing two forms of energy from the fuel. One form being heat and the other being electrical or mechanical energy. In a conventional thermal power plant, high-pressure steam is generated by burning fuels. It is used to drive a turbine, which in turn drives an alternator to produce electric power. The exhaust steam is generally condensed to water which goes back to the boiler. Resource management. The efficiency of conventional power plants is only around 35% as a large amount of heat is lost in the process of condensing. In a EO generation plant, the low-pressure exhaust steam coming out of the turbine is not condensed, but used for heating purposes in factories or houses. Thus very high efficiency levels, in the range of 75% to 90% can be reached. By meeting both power and heat needs, EO generation leads to significant cost savings for the plant and reduction in emissions of pollutants due to reduced fuel consumption. The potential of power generation from EO generation in India is more than 20,000 MW even at conservative estimates. Bagasse-based EO generation is being promoted in India as it is the largest producer of sugar in the world. The potential for EO generation thus lies in facilities with joint requirement of heat and electricity, such as sugar and rice mills, distilleries, petrochemical sector and industries such as fertilizer, steel, chemical, cement, pulp and paper and aluminum. Wind energy has been used for hundreds of years for sailing, grinding grain, and for irrigation. Wind energy systems convert the kinetic energy associated with the movement of air to more useful forms of power. Wind turbines transform the energy in the wind into mechanical power, which can then be used directly for grinding etc. or to generate electricity. Wind turbines can be used singly or in clusters called wind farms. Small wind turbines called aerogenerators can be used to charge large batteries. Windmills for water pumping have been installed in many countries, particularly in the rural areas. Table 7.2 summarizes the status of renewable energy resource use in India. It is evident that we still have a long way to go. Table 7.2 Renewable energy resource potential and current status. Look at the screen. Conventional sources. The power production through conventional sources like oil, gas, coal and hydro lags far behind the current demand driven by growth in agriculture, industry and the population. India's electricity sector currently faces problems of capacity, distribution losses, poor reliability, and frequent blackouts. Indian industry cites power supply as one of the biggest limitations on progress. 1. Government estimate projects 8 to 10% annual growth in energy demand over the next 15 years if the economy grows as expected in the 7 to 8% per year range. The shortfall implies greater dependence on international markets. Oil supplies nearly 30% of India's energy. Oil consumption in the country was approximately 1.93 million barrels per day, BID, in 1999 and is projected to climb to 3.1 million BID by 2010. India draws most of its oil from the Bombay High, Upper Assam, Cambay, Krishna Godavari, and Kaveri basins. Oil reserves are estimated at 4.7 billion barrels. The Bombay High field, India's largest producing field, generated 250,000 BID in 1998 and 210,000 BID in 1999. Consumption of petroleum products rose from 57 million tons in 1991-1992 to 107 million tons in 2000. Forecasts for 2005 put market volume at 163.8 million tons. The India Hydrocarbon Vision 2025 report estimates future refinery demand at 368 million tons by 2025. Thus, India is becoming a major global market for petroleum products. About 7% of India's energy needs are met by natural gas, especially in power generation, fertilizer, and petrochemicals production. Natural gas can serve to reduce dependence on foreign oil. Absence of sulfur dioxide and reduced levels of carbon dioxide and nitrogen oxide are major environmental benefits of using natural gas. Currently, India's natural gas consumption is met entirely with domestic production. However, this scenario is expected to change within a few years as gas-fired power plants are constructed in the country along the coast to allow for easier access to supply by LNG tankers. India depends on coal for more than half of its total energy needs. Nearly 3/4 of the country's electricity and 63% of commercial energy comes from coal. India has huge coal reserves accounting for 8% of the world's total. It is the third leading coal producer in the world after China and the United States. Most of its coal demand is satisfied through domestic production, with the only exception being coking coal that is in short supply. Despite India's wealth in coal reserves, only about 3% is coking coal, so India's steel industry must import coking coal to meet about 25% of its annual needs. As individuals living in urban areas, we are continually faced with a situation of low energy availability. Conserving energy in homes, offices, in transport, and commercial centers has to become a major concern and a habit with us. 7.2.4 Mineral resources. Although more than 3,000 minerals are known today, only about 100 minerals, metallic, non-metallic, gem and radioactive, are used in human society for various purposes, e.g. in industry, in defense, for building and ornamental purpose. India has a large number of economically useful minerals that constitute 1/4 of the world's known mineral resources. About 2/3 of its iron, Deposits lie in a belt along Orissa and Bihar border. It has the world's largest deposits of coal. Next to Russia, India has the largest supply of manganese. India also produces 3/4 of the world's mica. It has huge chromite, bauxite, gypsum, nickel ore, ilmenite, sillimanite reserves. Copper, gold and diamond mines exist in many parts of India. We also have petroleum deposits in several regions of the country. Nuclear uranium as well as some varieties of rare earths are also found in India. Thus, India is endowed with rich mineral resources distributed in different parts of India. The inventory of each mineral is updated by Indian Bureau of Mines on the basis of data furnished by Geological Survey of India, Mineral Exploration Corporation, DGM of different states and other exploration agencies and leaseholders. 7.2.5 Biological resources. Biological resources include food, fiber, medicinal, fuel, wood, ornamental plants and animals. Existence of most living organisms depends on primary producers, mainly plants. 5,000 plant species have been used as food by humans since ancient times, but less than 20 now feed the majority of the world's population, and just 3 or 4 carbohydrate crops are staples for the vast majority. Apart from producing fibers for our day-to-day use, many plant species are increasingly being used for ornamental and horticultural purposes. With new hybrids and strains being developed, there is a clear relationship between the conservation of biological diversity and the discovery of new biological resources. The relatively few developed plant species currently cultivated have had a large amount of research and selective breeding applied to them. Many presently underutilized food crops have the potential of becoming important in the future. One of the important benefits of conservation of biodiversity is the preservation of wild plant gene pool. This pool can be used to augment the narrow genetic base of the established food crops, providing disease resistance, improving productivity and different environmental tolerances. The short and long-term values of these genetic resources are enormous, and most improvements in agriculture and silviculture depend on their preservation. The gene pool value of natural habitats will increase further as remaining natural habitats become more scarce. Biodiversity conservation promotes in situ gene banks that need to be effectively managed. The conservation of diversity is also essential for finding effective biological control organisms and for breeding disease-resistant species. Ideas on developing plant species for wider use and/or economic benefits can be derived from studies on the use of plants by local communities. Potential products which may be derived from biological resources include sunscreens from corals, light and high tensile fibers from silkworms, and instant adhesives from velvet worms or barnacles. Microorganisms are important in the production of extensive ranges of agrochemicals, proteins for animal feed, enzymes and biopolymers. India has a very long history of using medicinal plants. The traditional system of medicine in India prescribing plant extracts in therapy dates back to the early age of Rig Veda, 4500–1600 BC. The therapeutic efficacies of herbal medicines led to the evolution of Ayurveda, which literally means science of life. In India, about 7,500 species of plants have been recorded to have medicinal value, of which 1,200 are found in South India. Wood is a primary source of fuel in third world countries. It is used in construction and forms the basis for paper production. It is still largely harvested from the wild. Forests provide us with wood, raw materials, prevent floods and soil erosion, increase underground water supply and humidity of air, provide an abode for the wildlife, check air pollution, and play a vital role in the economy of a nation. Indeed, they are indispensable to human beings. However, forest cover is being lost rapidly due to human activities. Deforestation not only diminishes the natural beauty of any place but also upsets the ecological balance of that place. It is believed that an area of tropical forest 4 times the size of Switzerland disappears every year. In India, hillsides have been stripped of their vegetation cover in the Himalayas. This has become a major cause for avalanches and landslides. Wildlife is also facing the specter of destruction. Due to destruction of forests, pollution, climatic changes and extensive hunting of animals, many species of wildlife have become extinct. Wildlife destruction has upset the whole mechanism of natural regulation and balance, which could endanger our very existence. Wildlife such as the auk bird of Northern Popular Region, moa bird of New Zealand, dodo bird of Mauritius, thylacine of Tasmania, Indian tiger, Indian rhino, pink-headed duck, black-necked crane, bustard, barking deer, monitor lizard, pans, black panther, jaguar, lions, Indian wild ass, musk deer, etc. are examples which are already or are about to become extinct. Animals facing the threat of extinction are Gila trout, Hopasan toad, gharial, Californian conodor, Javan rhinoceros, puma, polar bear, antelope, humpback whale, Kashmir stage hangal, etc. Among plant species monkey orchid, alpine catchfly, snake's head fritillary, etc. are endangered. You may think that killing just one animal or a bird won't matter much. But it is worth considering that there may be millions of people having such an attitude, who may be killing just one animal or bird every now and then. It is this threat to wildlife that makes it mandatory for every person to understand the relation between organisms and their environment, and the need to protect plant and animal species. Serious efforts are needed for wildlife conservation. Today there are about 1,200 national parks and reserves in the world. The Himachal Wildlife Project, which was launched in the early 1980s, was the first serious attempt made by Indian conservationists in this direction. World Wildlife Fund, WWF, was set up in 1962 to provide funds for the conservation and preservation of wildlife. About 70% of WWF projects have achieved their targets. India has taken the lead in rescuing a vital and charismatic predator, the snow leopard. Under the Project Tiger, launched in 1973, about 27 tiger reserves have been created in 14 states of India covering an area of about 37,761 square kilometers. Crocodile Project was launched in 1976 to save endangered crocodile species. Project Elephant was launched in 1992 to ensure long-term survival of elephants in their natural habitats. It is being implemented in 12 states. Several other projects at a smaller scale have been undertaken in India to protect tortoises, musk deer and other endangered animal species. Wildlife sanctuaries and parks have been set up all over India. See Table 7.3. Table 7.3, Wildlife Sanctuaries and National Parks in India as on August 2000. Look at the screen. In spite of these efforts, a lot more needs to be done. Our political and legal systems alone do not suffice. Massive individual and voluntary effort is needed. In this direction, poaching and illegal hunting should be stopped. The export and sale of animal products should be completely banned. Habitats of wildlife, like forests, wetlands, etc., should be conserved. Massive afforestation programs have to be set in motion. Eco-friendly stationery can save hundreds of bamboo or eucalyptus trees. Use of recycled paper should be encouraged. Indeed, we should all support and participate in or initiate environmental action programs. Afforestation is perhaps one of the most important programs in which everyone can contribute. We can also refrain from using products that are not eco-friendly, are animal-based or lead to loss of biodiversity. Regenerating forests, initiated in 1976, the social forestry program of the government aims at planting trees on unused and fallow land, degraded, government land close to human settlements, in and around agricultural fields, along railway lines and roadsides, river and canal banks, village common land, wasteland and panchayat land. The plantations are raised with the involvement of people living in those areas to meet the growing demand for timber, fuel wood, fodder, etc., thereby reducing the pressure on the traditional forest areas. Social forestry scheme can be categorized into the following groups: farm forestry, community forestry, and extension forestry. In farm forestry, individual farmers are encouraged to plant trees on their own farmland to meet the domestic and agricultural needs of the family, such as fuel wood, providing shade for the agricultural crops, as wind shelters, for soil conservation, or to use wasteland. In community forestry programs, the government provides seedlings and fertilizer to the community to raise and maintain trees on community land. Planting of trees on the sides of roads, canals and railways, along with planting on wastelands is known as extension forestry, i.e., increasing the boundaries of forests. Under this project there has been creation of wood lots in the village common lands, government wastelands and panchayat lands. Schemes for afforesting degraded government forests that are close to villages are being carried out all over the country. So far you have studied about various natural resources and several aspects of conserving and managing them at the governmental, community and individual level. One of the major aspects of resource conservation and management is recycling and management of waste. 7.3 Waste management. Every day millions of tons of municipal solid waste, industrial waste and biomedical waste is generated in our country. This is a valuable material and energy resource if recycled and reused. Municipal solid waste is generated mainly from residential and commercial complexes in urban areas and consist of household waste, construction and demolition debris, sanitation residue, and waste from streets. The amount of municipal solid waste has been increasing rapidly and its composition changing with increasing urbanization and change in lifestyle and food habits. In 1947, cities and towns in India generated an estimated 6 million tons of solid waste. In 1997, it was about 48 million tons. Waste disposal is a major problem with more than 25% of the municipal solid waste not being collected at all. Most Indian cities lack adequate capacity to transport waste and there are no sanitary landfills to dispose it of. The existing landfills are neither well equipped nor well managed and are not lined properly to protect against contamination of soil and groundwater. Resource management. Soiled, hospital waste such as cloth soiled with blood and other body fluids, toxic waste, old medicines, paints, chemicals, bulbs, spray cans, fertilizer and pesticide containers, batteries, shoe polish etc. Tremendous scope exists for reducing, reusing and recycling the waste as shown in Fig. 7.8 below. Look at the screen. Fig. 7.8 Aspects of management of municipal solid waste. Amongst the various categories of waste, hospital waste like soiled bandages, disposables, cultures, anatomical wastes, chemical wastes, discarded medicines pose grave environmental risk. This waste is highly infectious and needs to be managed in a scientific manner. Heat care centers are yet to pay due attention to hospital waste management and are very slow in responding to waste disposal mechanism. Building up public pressure is likely to accelerate this process. Waste disposal. As cities grow in size with a rise in the population, the amount of waste generated will increase. The local corporations in cities adopt different methods for the disposal of waste: open dumps, landfills, sanitary landfills, and incineration plants. In open dumps, the waste is untreated, uncovered and not segregated. It is the breeding ground for flies, rats, and other insects that spread disease. The rainwater runoff from these dumps contaminates nearby land and water, thereby spreading disease. Unlike an open dump, a landfill is a covered pit dug in the ground into which garbage is dumped. At the end of each day, a layer of soil is scattered on top of it and some mechanism, usually earth-moving equipment, is used to compress the garbage, which now forms a cell. A landfill is made up of many such cells. After the landfill is full, the area is covered with a thick layer of mud and the site can thereafter be developed as a parking lot or a park. The hazard of landfills is that all types of waste is dumped into them. When water seeps through them, it gets contaminated and in turn pollutes the surrounding area. An alternative to landfills which can solve the problem of such a pollution to some extent is a sanitary landfill built in a methodical manner. A sanitary landfill is lined with materials that are impermeable such as plastics and clay, and are also built over impermeable soil. However, constructing sanitary landfills is very costly and very often the plastic liner develops cracks as it reacts with various chemical solvents present in the waste. Incineration plants are used to burn waste once the recyclable material has been segregated. At the end of the process, all that is left behind is ash. During the process, some of the ash floats out with the hot air. This is called fly ash. Both the fly ash and the ash that is left in the furnace after burning have high concentrations of dangerous toxins such as dioxins and heavy metals. Disposing of this ash is a problem. The ash that is buried at the landfills can leach and cause severe contamination. At present, incineration is kept as the last resort, used mainly for treating the infectious medical waste because it produces tons of toxic ash and pollutes air and water. Moreover, large amount of the waste that is burnt can be recovered and recycled. This is why the 3 rupees, reduce, reuse, recycle, of waste management become necessary at the level of individual households. Organic matter constitutes 35% to 40% of the municipal solid waste generated in India. This waste can be recycled by the method of composting, one of the oldest forms of disposal. It is the natural process of decomposition of organic waste that yields manure or compost, which is very rich in nutrients. In the process of composting, microorganisms, mainly fungi and bacteria, convert degradable organic waste into a humus-like substance. The compost is high in carbon and nitrogen and is an excellent medium for growing plants. The process of composting ensures that the organic waste is utilized and the nutrients are recycled to be returned to the soil. Compost increases the soil's ability to hold water and makes the soil easier to cultivate. Composting is not only clean, cheap, and safe, it also significantly reduces the amount of disposable garbage. Vermicomposting has become very popular in the last few years. In this method, earthworms are added to the kitchen and other biological waste. These help to break the waste and the added excreta of the worms makes the compost very rich in nutrients. Benefits of composting. Compost allows the soil to retain more plant nutrients over a longer period. Supplies partly the 16 essential elements needed by the plants. Makes soil easier to cultivate. Helps reduce the adverse effects of excessive alkalinity, acidity or the excessive use of chemical fertilizer. Aids in preventing soil erosion by keeping the soil covered. Helps keep the soil cool in summer and warm in winter. Helps in controlling the growth of weeds in the garden. Recycling and reuse of waste. Recycling involves the collection of used and discarded materials, processing these materials and creating new products from them. In the process, the amount of waste that is thrown into the community dustbins is reduced, resulting in a cleaner environment and fresher air. The importance of recycling wastes is recognized by everyone in our country. In fact, ours is a traditionally recycling society. The use and throw culture is not a part of our traditional values. Rather, reuse, recycle, and waste retrieval is a part of our psyche. You may like to note the practices of reusing materials followed in most Indian homes. A common example is reusing old clothes as dusters, napkins, etc. Recycling of tires and tubes is quite common. A most creative manifestation of reusing waste is seen in the famous rock garden created by Shri Nek Chand in Chandigarh. However, the methodology for safe recycling of waste has not been standardized. If recycling is done in a proper manner, it will solve the problems of waste or garbage. At the community level, a large number of NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and private sector enterprises have taken an initiative in segregation and recycling of waste. Nora International in Chennai recycles a large part of the waste that is collected. A major recycling project is underway in Bangalore. Waste is being used for composting, making pellets to be used in gasifiers, etc. Plastics are sold to the factories that reuse them. The steps involved in the process prior to recycling include a. Collection of waste from doorsteps, commercial places, etc. b. Collection of waste from community dumps. C. Collection, picking up of waste from final disposal sites. The generalized scheme of waste recycling is given below. Look at the screen. Fig. 7.9, Recycling of wastes. Even as our society has been confronted with environmental crises, people have responded and risen to these challenges. Literally thousands of citizens groups have sprung up in the last 2 decades or so. There are 2 broad categories of groups: those who challenge and oppose environmentally destructive activities, and those who carry out regenerative work or work towards alternatives. You may like to know more about them. We describe below some initiatives from the people themselves to protect and conserve their environment. Recycling, some benefits: conserves resources, saves energy, prevents emissions of many greenhouse gases and water pollutants, supplies valuable raw materials to industry, stimulates the development of greener technologies, reduces the need for new landfills and incinerators, creates jobs. Various ways of reusing things: turn empty jars into containers for leftover food or pots for growing plants. Use cloth napkins or towels. Refill bottles. Use durable ceramic mugs. Donate old magazines or surplus equipment. Reuse boxes. Purchase refillable pens and pencils. Practicing the 3 rupees of waste management. 1. Reuse. Do not throw away soft drink cans or bottles. Cover them with homemade paper or paint on them and use them as pencil stands or small vases. 2. Recycle. Use shopping bags made of cloth or jute, which can be used over and over again. Segregate your waste to make sure that it is collected and taken for recycling. 3. Reduce. Reduce the generation of unnecessary waste. E.g., carry your own shopping bag when you go to the market and put all your purchases directly into it. 7.4 People's Movement for Environment Protection and Conservation. During the past few decades, several LA-DAN projects were stopped before or during the planning stages by local opposition. These include the Bhopalpatnam and Inchampalli in Madhya Pradesh, Silent Valley in Kerala and Vishnuprayag in Uttar Pradesh. A major World Bank-funded project to replace a massive area of natural mixed forests in central India by industrial pine plantations was abandoned after strong local tribal opposition. A move to hand over thousands of hectares of common lands to a private industry in Karnataka was contested and won in court. The National Fisherfolk Federation has managed to stop destructive trawling off parts of the Indian coast and to enforce seasonal fishing restrictions in marine waters. In recent times, the Narmada Bachao Andolan against the Sardar Sarovar project has combined massive grassroots mobilization with incisive critiques of the project to generate awareness of the conflict between elitist development and sustainability or resource use. Indeed, it has redefined the contours of the environment development debate the world over and shown that even as powerful an agency as the World Bank can be challenged. Of all the people's movements for forest regeneration, the Chipko movement in the Himalayas is, perhaps, the most famous. It not only successfully resisted deforestation in several areas but showed that community afforestation efforts can be enormously successful. Several experiments with watershed management and simple rainwater harvesting techniques have reversed ecological degradation and shown alternative development models. They have achieved what big dance cannot at much less ecological, social and financial cost. Raleigh-Ganj Siddhi, Maharashtra, Sukhamajri, Haryana, Gopalpura and Alwa, Rajasthan, and Jardhar, Uttar Pradesh, are just some examples across the country. Pani Panchayats of Maharashtra are innovative institutional arrangements of decision-making in which villages ensure the equitable distribution of irrigation water. Thus they have shown the way for effectively tackling the problem of water scarcity. Van panchayats in the Himalayan foothills are attempting the same with forest resources. The clear lesson from such experiences is that people, local communities everywhere have to be involved in any kind of natural resource management. But there is still a long way to go before local communities are at the center stage in decision making. And just as long to go before the development process becomes truly environment friendly. We briefly describe below some successful people's initiatives. The Chipko movement, 1987. As forests came to be increasingly felled for commerce and industry, Indian villages sought to protect their livelihoods through the Gandhian method of satyagraha or non-violence resistance. In the 1970s and 1980s, this resistance to the destruction of forests spread throughout India and became organized and known as the Chipko movement. The first Chipko action took place spontaneously in 1973 and over the years has spread to many parts of our country. The name of the movement came from a word meaning embrace. The villagers hugged the trees and thus saved them by putting their bodies in the way of the contractors' axes. The Chipko movement was the result of hundreds of decentralized and locally autonomous initiatives. Its leaders and activists have primarily been village women, acting to save their means of subsistence and their communities. Men have been involved, too, however, and some of them have given wider leadership to the movement. More information about this movement can be obtained from http://www.writeliveLIhood.se/recip1987_2 html. Sukhamajri village. Sukhamajri is a village located near the city of Chandigarh. In 1979, when the nation was facing a severe drought, the villagers of Sukhamajri built small tanks to harvest rainwater and agreed to protect their watershed in order to ensure that their tanks did not get silted up. The main incentive for the villagers to protect their watershed came because of an assurance from the Forest Department that they would have the right to the use of the forest land. The combination of public, private and community investments and the participatory efforts of the villagers has helped to increase crop production manifold, and the protection of the forest area has greatly increased grass and tree fodder availability. This, in turn, has increased milk production. With growing prosperity, Sukhamajri's economy has undergone a change. Who could imagine that televisions, tractors and bicycles could be had for mere grass and water? Asks a villager. Sukhamajri is the first village in India to have income tax levied on the income it earns from the ecological regeneration of its degraded watershed. Raleigh-Ganj Siddhi village. Raleigh-Ganj Siddhi is a village in a drought-prone area of Maharashtra where the annual rainfall ranges from only 450 mm to 650 mm. Once upon a time, the inhabitants of Raleigh-Ganj Siddhi were not even assured one regular crop. The village was poverty-stricken, with less than 1 acre of irrigated land per family. In early 70s, Krishna Bhauro Hazare, a retired driver from The Indian Army, began the task of constructing storage ponds, reservoirs and gully plugs with the help of village people. Due to the steady percolation of water, the groundwater table began to rise. Simultaneously, government social forestry schemes were used to plant 300,000 to 400,000 trees in and around the village. Because of the increased availability of irrigation water, land that was lying fallow came under cultivation and the total area under farming increased from 630 hectares to 950 hectares. The average yields of millets, sorghum and onion increased substantially. Every effort was made in the village to ensure equitable access to the resources generated. Only low water consuming crops were allowed. Water conservation efforts resulted in increased availability of groundwater that in turn has facilitated the development of community wells. By Indian standards, Raleganj Siddhi is a rich village now. Today not a single inhabitant of the village depends on drought relief. Incomes have increased substantially. Over a quarter of the households earn nearly ₹500,000 a year. Raleganj Siddhi's income distribution is also much less skewed than that of rural Maharashtra. 7.5 activities. Write an essay in about 500 words on issues in resource management on individual and community life, sharing the experiences and problems in your own vicinity. Outline the interventions, policy level, individual or community oriented, required to improve the natural resource management in your home, residential area, workplace, community. Develop a plan of action for improving the status of natural resources in your surroundings and try to implement it. We now summarize the contents of this unit. 7.6 Let us sum up. In this unit we have highlighted the concerns related to the management of natural resources such as water, land, soil, energy, minerals and biological resources. If used with wise and careful planning and management, these resources will last longer and can be maintained for future generations. Whereas centralized governmental interventions are needed at the policy and implementation level, much can be done at the individual and community level to conserve and regenerate these resources. Water conservation involves state measures such as policies and incentives for regulated water consumption as well as individual and community efforts for rainwater harvesting. Proper management of land will enable us to preserve our land resources by planned land use and by checking the intensity of soil erosion. Regeneration of wasteland involves special efforts. The energy consumption in India does not match world standards, and considerable efforts are needed to meet the energy needs of our people. Yet as individuals we need to avoid wasting energy and optimizing its use to the extent possible in our homes and workplaces. Biomass is a very important resource. We can play a role in biomass generation by helping in afforestation and biodiversity conservation. Management of waste, especially municipal solid waste, with emphasis on minimization, reduction, reuse and recycling, is one of the best means of conservation of resources. It is possible to make successful interventions in resource regeneration and management through individual and community initiatives as revealed by the experiences of Sukhamajri, Raleganj Siddhi, Chipko movement, Pani Panchayats of Maharashtra, and other such examples. Thank you for watching. We will see you in the next video with the next chapter.